Day 2, Phase 2 of TFC experiment. I thought removing resistance would make relapse easier. Instead, my awareness keeps interrupting the loop before even the narrative and the story fully reopens. And I think that reveals something important. The default has actually changed. Before, the progression almost instant. I would feel the trigger. I would engage in fantasy. I would immerse myself in the story. And then the behavior followed. The brain automatically just followed the story. But now the urge can still appear, but trained awareness interrupts the narrative before the loop fully assembles itself. And that's the big difference. That's a U-turn. And that's the key insight. The urge alone may not drive the compulsive behavior. The story does. The fantasy, the feeding, the immersion, the meaning that I gave to it. That's the bridge between the urge and the action. Without the story, without the fantasy, without the immersion, there is no escalation. The urge fades on its own. The pattern breaks. The external reward never arrives. And the brain eventually learns from the mismatch. And that's how the old loop weakens. Do that repeatedly for 90 days, consistently, and something strange starts happening. My trained awareness is now getting in the way of the old pattern. Not suppression, not fear, not avoidance, interruption. The gates no longer opens automatically. The narrative, the story, I don't follow automatically. I can still consciously engage, but now it feels like a conscious decision instead of a reflex. That's a major difference. Because compulsive behavior may depend heavily on unconscious progression, and trained awareness interferes with that progression. At the same time, I understand something important. The brain preserves highly conditioned reward maps for a long time, longer than 90 days. So this does not mean that the old pathway disappeared. It's just weakened, but it still exists. The brain still remembers. and it can still reactivate if repeatedly reinforced again. But for 90 days, the new pathway feels more dominant. Awareness, mission, interruption, observation. A pathway aligned with my identity, with my goals, and my mission. That's a more dominant pathway. And maybe that's what rewiring actually is. Not deleting the old pathway, but changing which pathway the brain defaults to automatically. Because the brain doesn't just listen to what you say, it watches what you do repeatedly and consistently. And now the experiment gets even more interesting, because the next question becomes how fast the brain remembers the old pattern once the gate reopens, once I follow the story again, once immersion returns, once fantasy feeding resumes. It's not does the urge exist, but how quickly does the old sequence rebuild itself? How fast does fantasy deepen? How fast immersion returns? How fast attentional captures strengthen? How fast automaticity reactivates? Because maybe the old circuitry survives, but awareness now slows the speed of reassembly. So with that, I think this experiment is evolving into something much deeper than abstinence. This is becoming an exploration of awareness, conditioning, automaticity, pathway dominance, and conscious versus unconscious behavior. Because maybe freedom is not never feeling the urge again. Maybe freedom is seeing the wave without automatically becoming the wave. And right now, that's exactly what experiment 2 is starting to test. Trained awareness keeps interrupting the loop. And honestly, I don't want to force it. So day 2, no relapse. We'll see what happens on day 3.